Welcome, everyone. We see some people are still joining, so we'll wait just about one more minute as folks are signing on, and then we'll get started. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. So we may have people continue to join, but let's get started. We have about 45 minutes to go through some content for all of you and answer your questions. So this evening's webinar is on understanding our emotions during this challenging time. This is part of the New York-Presbyterian's Youth Anxiety Center's webinar series that will be ongoing throughout the month of May. My name is Shannon Bennett. I'm a clinical psychologist at Weill Cornell Medicine in New York City. And I'm the site clinical director for the New York-Presbyterian Youth Anxiety Center at Weill Cornell Medicine.
Hi everyone, my name is Carolina Serrate. I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist at Columbia University Medical Center, New York-Presbyterian Hospital, and the medical director of the Youth Anxiety Center at Washington Heights.
So just a few items of housekeeping before we get started. We've seen many of the questions that you all submitted at the time that you registered. Thank you so much for submitting your questions. We've integrated many of those questions into the slides and into a Q&A at the end that we'll present to you. For those of you who may have additional questions while we're speaking, you can submit your questions using the Q&A function or using the chat function. Don't raise your hand because that we may not be able to see. We'll try our best to get to your questions within the time allotted. And if there's anything that we don't get to, we can try to respond to it after the fact. We also have other topics. So if your question was already covered in one of our previous or future webinars, we'll let you know how to get that answer. There's also a very brief 3-question survey at the end. So when you log off, whether that's at the very end of the webinar or if you log off early, we really appreciate your feedback if you can answer those 3 questions for us. So let's get going. Here we go. All right, so here's what you all wanted to know. These are some of the main themes and questions that many of you have already submitted to us, right on the topic of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So some of you asked, how do we stay optimistic and motivated and not be fearful? How do we overcome uncertainty? What are the best ways to cope with our emotions during this time? How do we encourage resiliency and coping with disappointment? How do I handle feeling lonely, even though I have 2 siblings or maybe living with roommates or other family members? Why are my emotions a roller coaster? And what are better ways to handle stress? These are all so excellent, really common issues that many of us are handling right now and trying to figure out. So we're going to try to speak to each of these topics throughout our series tonight.
Great. So in thinking about the many different emotions that we're all experiencing, it's important to kind of reflect and think about what have been the things that have happened that are connected to these emotions. I think everyone around the world can agree that life has been interrupted for them one way or another with the coronavirus pandemic. And for us here in the United States, this started roughly about 4 to 6 weeks ago. Today, we're talking specifically with young people because there are specific circumstances about how life got interrupted for you guys during this pandemic. So if you're part of the high school, junior, or seniors, there are very important things that were happening for you this spring and summer that just got to put on pause. So things that everyone looks forward to and that are important kind of like milestones and accomplishments in our lives. Things like graduation, which are, significant celebrations for families and then obviously great accomplishments, and fun things like prom, right? For those of you who are engaged in sports and this is your last year, a lot of those last games are kind of out the window. And just having those last weeks with your friends in school are just not going to be the same, even if you're connected online. Furthermore, not knowing for sure what's going to happen in the fall, right? So this is a period of your life where there's a lot of excitement, there's transitions, you're looking forward to that next step. And then all of a sudden, that next step may look completely different, and we don't even know exactly how it's going to look like. You had to finish your school year doing remote learning, which, as much as we're all used to being on our computers and our phones and we're very virtually connected, this is a complete shift in your life to not be able to have the structure of the class, your classmates, and seeing your friends at school. So this is a big, big change. For those people who are thinking about summer plans or a gap year, or just in general, moving around locally, this is not available as easily as it was before and may not be available at all. Those people who are thinking about taking time and maybe looking for a job, or for those of you who were planning to go to college but also need to have a part-time job, thinking about the whole financial repercussions kind of change the scenario and gives a different future to look into and to have to plan into. I am sure that some of you may already have had conversations with your families about how financially we're all being impacted and how that may specifically impact your plans, maybe for college or any other plans that you had ahead of you. This is a moment in the life of young adults. We're having this culmination of high school and a whole stage in your life is something that you really share with everyone, but there's that really unique bond with your friends from high school. And unfortunately, the quality to the ability to share that is lost to a certain degree because you can't see your friends as easily. So these are all very significant changes. And I think when we're thinking about what emotions are coming up, then it makes sense to think about, well, these are the things that I'm dealing with. So college students and college grads are in similar kind of circumstances, right? So for those who were just recently starting college during their freshman year, is this quick transition from gaining this, independence and structure in your new life to being back at home and feeling like maybe you're back in high school and not having access to like that new life that you have created for you. It's also having a different structure for your activities and your social network. Now you have friends that live all over the country and you may stay connected, but it's not the same as the routine that you had established by being in a college campus, if that was your situation. For those who are thinking about jobs or internships during the summer, it's also something in their minds because it will be more challenging to be able to follow through with those plans. And similarly, financial stressors for the families and for you as young adults individually. This, I think, resonates even more with those who are college graduates or about to graduate, thinking about the job market out there. And for those who are maybe already working and now have to adapt their schedule to work at home and kind of try to coordinate things with other adults in the house and maybe all other children or young adults in the house. Some of the young adults and adults across the country are either being laid off or experiencing pay cuts. And then you need to start to figure out how to pay bills and what the next steps are going to be if there's not a lot of certainty on your job security. And last but definitely not least, and this is applicable obviously to all of you, is figuring out dating and romantic relationships, right? So for people maybe who are on a more serious relationship, considering maybe spending some of the quarantine time together or not, if that's an option. For people who are younger and that is not an option, not you're interested in that, is how do you keep the relationship alive and still be connected even though you can't see each other? And just in general, figuring out how does the relationship transform now into this new virtual world. So these are not insignificant losses. We are all facing tremendous losses globally and a lot of human loss, right? So very, very challenging situations, but this doesn't make these losses less important or less painful, if you may.
So there are so many emotions that we are all experiencing right now. And we may be experiencing a little bit of of everything. But as Carolina just mentioned, there's a lot of reasons and so many different stressors that are causing us to feel a variety of different emotions. So we may feel fear at the current situation, and fear for our loved ones, fear for ourselves, fear for our safety, fear for our economic well-being. We feel sadness and disappointment and grief at the things that are, and the people and the experiences and the freedoms that are lost right now. So a lot of sadness and grief. There's a great deal of anxiety. This is such an uncertain time. There's so many things that we just don't know, that are not knowable right at this moment. And that creates a feeling of uncertainty and anxiety that can be really hard to handle. We may feel very angry and feel levels of frustration, feel angry at the things that we're not able to do, or angry with the people who we're with right now, or feel frustrated because things aren't working out the way that we want them to. And those feelings can be really uncomfortable. We may just feel really bored. A lot of the things that we love to do that keep us busy in our day are not available to us right now. And so being at home may feel just pretty bored and pretty monotonous, kind of same thing day after day. At the same time, I've heard from some people who, at least in the beginning, and maybe this is still true for some people, felt a little bit of relief. If school or socialization or parties was really stressful for you, having that taken off the table might feel a little bit relieving. So some people feel a little bit of relief, or if they learn that their loved ones are okay, they may be feeling relief for that reason as well. Some people may be handling this okay. They're content with their routine, and they're content in their place right now. And some people may be feeling gratitude that they are healthy, or their loved ones are healthy, or that they have what they have at this moment. So there's a whole range and a whole mix, and we might feel some combination of all of these all in one day, right? It's very possible to have mixed emotions and to feel different things about one situation. So it's kind of confusing, but it's very common that we feel a whole mixture of different emotions. That roller coaster. Why are my emotions a roller coaster right now? That we heard earlier in the questions that you all submitted. This is a very real experience. And everything that you're feeling right now is totally valid, and you are not alone. So many people are feeling things that are similar to you, and some people are feeling things that are different, right? There's a whole range of reactions, but the feelings that you're having are real, and they're valid, and they're okay. Our emotions are important. They give us very important information. So the reason that humans have emotions is because they tell us what to do. They tell us how to operate in a given situation. So it's really important that we pay attention to them. The reason we feel fear is for our own survival. If we're in a situation that's dangerous, fear motivates us to get out of that situation, to keep ourselves safe. So there's a reason that we feel that way. It's important that we feel anxiety. It helps us to plan for the future and to be successful in the things that are coming up. So it's important that we feel anxiety, a certain level of anxiety. Sometimes our anxiety can kind of move past the point where it's helpful, and then it becomes unhelpful. But if we never felt fear, or we never felt anxious, then we might do things that are really unsafe, or we might not be ready for the things that are important to us, like a test or a first date. Those feelings are important, and they give us helpful information. There's even a reason to feel sad and to feel depressed. There's sadness and grief and longing lets us know that we have lost something that's important to us, and that we need to acknowledge that loss. So the sadness sort of moves us to take a moment away from our other routine and activities to acknowledge that loss, to feel those feelings, to be with ourselves or our loved ones, to cope with whatever it is that we're feeling sad about in that moment. And anger lets us know that we feel as though we've been wronged, that there's been some sort of injustice, that something doesn't feel right about what's going on. And so anger motivates us to try to fix that injustice. And that is also important. So our emotions are uncomfortable, right? We don't necessarily want to feel these feelings. They can feel very uncomfortable, but they're not dangerous. So our emotions are natural, they're important, they're necessary, and they're not dangerous. The emotions themselves are all okay, but the behaviors that we choose when we're feeling strong emotions can either make a situation better or worse. So that's an important distinction. We usually need to tolerate some level of that discomfort that we feel from these emotions that we don't necessarily want to feel. We have to learn how to feel those feelings long enough to make a good choice. So especially when we're feeling really strong levels of emotion, we're more likely to do something that we maybe wish we hadn't done later, because we act in the moment to make ourselves feel better, to get rid of that uncomfortable feeling. But if we can tolerate the uncomfortable feeling long enough, then we make a better choice that maybe works out better for us in the long run. But how do we do that? How do we manage all of these different emotions during such a challenging time? So there's a lot of different things. One, I think we all need to keep reminding ourselves again and again and again, and you've probably heard this before, but we need to be nice. We need to be kind and nice to ourselves and to the people around us. It's so important, especially right now. None of us have really done this before. We're all doing the best that we can. We've not experienced something like this before, so we have to be patient with ourselves and with others and be kind to ourselves and take care of ourselves, regardless of what it is that you're feeling. It can be helpful to focus on the things that you can actually control. There's so many things right now that we cannot control, but you can focus on the things that you can control. So we can control our own daily routine. We are in control for the most part of, when we get up, when we go to sleep, what activities we choose to do throughout the day. We might not have all of the activities available to us right now, but what's in front of you, you can choose. Am I going to watch Netflix, or am I going to do a home workout video, right? We can make some of those choices. We can control our own healthy habits. We can control what we're eating, what we're drinking, when we're sleeping, how much TV we're watching. We can control some of our own healthy choices and healthy habits. And we can control what coping strategies we try to use. It doesn't mean that they're easy to use them. Often are the most helpful coping strategies and the different things we're going to talk about today, they take work. And they don't always feel good right in the moment, but we can control how we choose to handle a situation. We can ask for help. And it's really important that we ask for help when you're feeling strong emotions, and seek out support from other people when you need it. As Carolina mentioned earlier, there's so many different kinds of stressors and losses that are going on right now. So you may feel like, everyone's going through something. Why is my problem important? But everybody's feelings are valid, and there's no competition, right? So regardless of what you're feeling or why, you can ask for help and you can seek out support if that's what you need. And social support is so important. That's part of what is so hard for us right now, because we can't access our support network in the same way that we are used to when we can be together. But there are other creative ways that we can be with our loved ones and our friends and try to get support through the people that are important to us. We can keep busy. Keeping busy is really helpful right now. It's a way of managing our emotions, keeping busy with, importantly, a variety and a balance of different types of activities. So one intervention, one treatment for depression is to plan activities, to do stuff, and to do a lot of different types of stuff. And the types of activities that tend to make us feel good include doing things that are fun, doing things with other people as well as things by ourselves, service activities. So we can feel good by doing something that makes somebody else feel good. So whether that's a service project that you could be involved in, delivering groceries to a sick neighbor, or just washing the dishes, helping out around the house, but doing things for other people make us feel good. Doing activities that give us a sense of achievement or mastery, whether that is your schoolwork that you really wish you didn't have to do, or learning a new skill. Even if we don't feel good doing it in the moment, we feel good when it's done, and we feel a sense of achievement or mastery, and that makes us feel a little bit better. And then physical activities or exercise can be really mood boosting and can shift, those emotions that we're feeling in a very powerful way. So coming back to this idea of a daily routine and a daily schedule and healthy habits and behaviors, trying to keep busy with a variety of these different types. So picking things from each of these different categories to fill your time can be a helpful way to manage your emotions. So we want to be aware of excessive media use, whether this is just the passive social media scrolling. There is some research that suggests that passive scrolling, just kind of passively looking at what other people are posting, is more linked to depression and anxiety. So it doesn't make us feel great. So shutting those things down, the nonstop Netflix might not make us feel that great. It's totally fine to watch movies and watch shows right now, but to try to mix it up with a variety of different activities, and to be mindful of how much news you're watching, and to turn it off when you feel like you need a break. It is important that we stay informed, but it's also important that we take some breaks. So the hard one is we try not to avoid your emotions, right? As I mentioned before, when we don't want to feel those uncomfortable feelings, and we make snap choices in the moment in response to our really strong emotions, we're more likely to do something that we regret later. And there are some really common ways that we choose to avoid our emotions, whether that's just avoiding or withdrawing from a situation. So leaving an interaction, or choosing not to join your friend's Zoom chat. Using substances to try to numb out or control our feelings has a lot of other consequences. Procrastination is a way that we put off things that are making us feel uncomfortable. So these are common avoidance strategies that allow us to not have to feel those things we don't want to feel. But again, while they may work really well in the short term, and that's why they're so common, they don't really work out for us in the long term. But on the other hand, so, this is hard because not avoiding our emotions can feel like riding a tidal wave. And that's hard. We don't want to flood ourselves with all of the emotions of the moment. So we try to focus on what are some strategies that we can use to feel our feelings, but not feel totally overwhelmed or out of control. So things like deep breathing and structured relaxation can help. Even deep breathing, slow, deep diaphragmatic breathing for 1 or 2 minutes can biologically clear out some of those stress chemicals that are making us feel uncomfortable. They bring the circuits online that help our body to relax. So engaging in deep breathing can be a really helpful strategy. It does take practice though. All of these strategies take some practice. And the more we practice when we're calm, the more available these strategies will be for us when we're upset. So deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and Carolina's going to talk about some other methods for relaxation. So if you're feeling really strong emotion, taking a moment and helping yourself to use some strategies to calm down can help to titrate those levels long enough till we make a choice for how do I listen to what this emotion is telling me and decide how to act on it. If we have something that we really don't want to do, or the thought of doing it is giving us some overwhelming dread or anxiety, we can try to break those really tough tasks down into smaller steps. And be creative about that and practice and ask your friends if they can, role play or type out the email and don't send it and then come back to it later. But think about what are these things that you're avoiding, and is there any way to try to break it down into a smaller step? And then this idea is sometimes we just build on our emotions with other uncomfortable emotions. So if you notice that you're feeling angry about something, and then you get anxious about the fact that you feel angry, and then you get sad about the fact that you feel anxious because you feel angry, now we're just layering upon layering more uncomfortable emotions. So whatever that initial emotion was, if we feel anxious and then we get upset that we're anxious, just notice that you're anxious. We shouldn't judge ourselves for feeling emotions. We've already talked about how they're normal. Everybody has them. We have them for a reason. They're valid. They're not dangerous. So we try to kind of peel off those layers of emotions and just accept what you're feeling and figure out how to best move forward. So this another really important concept in what's called cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a type of therapy that's based on this picture that we're seeing right now. This idea that what we think and how we feel and what we do are all interconnected. And that can cause our thoughts and feelings and behaviors to spiral on each other in a way that can make us feel worse and worse. But we can also change little things in each of these bubbles to try to reverse that tidal wave and help us start to feel a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. So I've talked about how, how we feel influences what we choose to do, but that arrow really importantly goes both ways. So what's really helpful to know and to practice is that what we do can feed back and change the way that we feel. So even if we don't feel like doing our assignment or calling that friend, if we do it, we may find that we feel better after we've done it than we think that we will feel. So that arrow goes both ways. So by doing some of these things that we're suggesting, even if we're not sure that they work or we're not sure how it's going to turn out, sometimes we can change how we're feeling by being creative about what we do. And that sometimes means doing the opposite of what we want to do. Right? So if our anxiety makes us want to avoid something, then instead, if we try to approach it, we may find that it makes us feel less anxious over time. Even if it makes us feel more anxious in the short term, it may make us feel less anxious in the long term. If our anger makes us really want to lash out at someone, if we act in the opposite and we help ourselves stay calm and instead practice patience, we may find that we feel a little bit better over time. And if our sadness or our boredom just makes us want to sit home and do nothing, if we do the opposite, if we get up and we do something, you may find that that helps us to feel better afterwards. So again, this is something that we can control in a way that we have the most control over what we do. We can't always control how we feel. We can't even always control the thoughts that pop into our head, but we can control and choose what behaviors we're going to do in response to those thoughts and those feelings. So what does this mean? How do we manage those thoughts and behaviors that are driven by our strong emotions? Well, it's important to know that how we feel, our emotions really color, they influence the way that we think about a situation. So when we're feeling a strong emotion, the thoughts that we're having are really influenced by that feeling, and they may not be true. And even if they are a little bit true, they're usually not helpful. So we can start to recognize what are these go-to thoughts that I have about myself or about other people when I'm anxious or when I'm angry or when I'm down. And are those really true? Is this based on fact or is this based on how I'm feeling? And if we can stick to the facts, if we can stick to what I know for sure about this situation, that can help, right? So that's a little bit hard to do right now because, as I said, there's a lot of things we don't know about COVID-19, and there's a lot of uncertainty about the economy and about when we'll be able to go out and feel safe doing that. So one strategy that I've been trying to practice is if I have a worry about, well, what are my chances of getting sick, or what are the chances of my loved one getting sick? If I have the thought, someone I know and love is going to get sick, and that's going to be bad, then I can also give equal weight to the alternative possibility that maybe that they won't die, or maybe that won't happen. We don't know which one is true, but we can at least give each thought equal space in our brain. And it doesn't mean we can predict. Our thoughts don't predict the future, but we can give equal weight to all possibilities. Right? When we're anxious or angry or sad, it drives us very narrowly to focus on one thing. And so the idea is just to open up our thinking to all certain possibilities and try to give equal weight in our mind or equal time to thinking about all of the possibilities. Another strategy is to check out other people's perspectives. What are other people thinking about this? And again, this is maybe hard to do right now because there's, everybody's feeling a little confused right now. But if other people aren't as nervous about something or are thinking about something differently than you are, then that's helpful information that what our emotions are telling us may not be true, or it may not be how everybody sees a specific situation. And I don't think many of us have ever been in a global pandemic before, but have we been in any version of this situation where we've had to experience something really hard? So when you've been in a really tough situation in the past, what did you learn about yourself or about other people? And what was helpful to you? Are there coping strategies that have helped you through tough times in the past? And are there ways that you can access those strategies to help you get through what you're experiencing right now?
So let's talk about now, what can we do for those things that we have no control of, right? Like we have no control that there's a virus that has gone around the world and we still don't have a vaccine, And that means every aspect of our life is going to be changed, right? We heard from Shannon different strategies to cope with things in the day-to-day, and specifically regaining some control and making some choices on how to manage our thoughts and emotions. But what do we do? Because there are things we just can't control. And for this, we want to share with you this skill that's called radical acceptance. This radical acceptance skill comes from a combination of a branch of cognitive behavioral therapy that's called DBT, and Eastern philosophy. I'm not sure if people have come across this sentence: pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And if they have made any attempt to try to understand or figure out what people mean by that. From this perspective of an Eastern philosophy and DBT, suffering is understood by having pain in our lives, which everyone is going to have pain, that's just part of life, but not being able to accept that that pain is there. And in the country, being stuck in emotions of anger, trying to fight reality, being bitter, being in denial, and acting out on those emotions, instead of being able to, and this is not easy, accept that things are as they are and we do not have control over it. So practicing this radical acceptance will help you get in a process where we accept what we can't not change. And in that, we gain the ability of not being stuck in emotions that are actually making us suffer more. So we go from a place of like, why me? This sucks. This is terrible. It's so not fair. All I want to do is be crying or yelling or just letting out this intensity of emotion in ways that are not helpful, and shifting to like, well, this is what it is. I'm stuck at home with my parents, and I'm stuck at home with my siblings, and maybe we don't all get along, and everyone is in a bad mood, but this is what it is. So I just have to, instead of being stuck, being angry about it, acknowledge it, accept it, and then that opens up a space to try to figure out how to address that pain. Next slide. So radical acceptance is not something easy. It's really a skill that could take a lifetime, but that you can practice every day with little things and small things. And probably practicing with small things first is going to make it easier to kind of have it applied to more challenging situations. This is essentially a choice, like a mental choice, right? But in order to be able to make that choice, we first need to become aware that we're stuck. We're stuck in fighting reality because it's so painful, because it's so unfair, because it sucks. Like right now, many aspects of your life may be sucking, right? And when we are able to label that anger, realize that we're bitter, realize that we're in denial, and maybe part of denial is avoidance. Maybe we're binge watching Netflix for 6, 8, 10 hours a day, or maybe we're using drugs at home, or just trying to sleep through the day because that feels better than having conversations with my family who annoys me or watching the news. Once we're able to identify that we're stuck in that place, then we can think about, hey, I have an alternative. I can make a choice and make a commitment to accept this. And this is a commitment that you're going to have to do over and over and over again. It's important to understand that radically accepting something doesn't mean that you're denying the feelings, ignoring the anger or the bitterness. It just means that you're allowing yourself to recognize it without having to be stuck in it. There's many things that can get in the way. We've been talking about thoughts and behaviors and emotions. Beliefs and emotions can get in the way of being able to make that choice to accept that this is what I have to deal with and I have no control over it. Some people believe that if they radically accept what's happening, that means that they're giving up and they're not going to try to figure out how to get, to that trip they were planning, or how to figure out how to move on to the college they really wanted to go, but maybe now they can't because there's not as much money at home, right? Or get that amazing job that they were hired, but then with this situation, there's a hire freeze and now there's no job. It doesn't mean you're giving up on that. It also doesn't mean that you approve, right, of what's happening, that you think it's right, or that you accept that your life is always going to be sucky because of the situation right now, and this is kind of like a sentence. In the same manner, emotions, very intense emotions are going to get in the way, right? When you're just experiencing very intense anger, it's just even hard to think about anything else that being anger, right? Or when sadness is just very overwhelming, right? Or when we're having a lot of guilt or shame or rage. So all of those things are going to make it very hard for you guys to be in a place of like, okay, I'm stuck here. I'm recognizing that I want things to be different. And they're not going to be different, but I'm just stuck with the emotion, and I need to commit to accept that this is my reality, to then open up that space to deal with the pain. So we've been talking about different strategies, and we talked about the connection between thoughts and emotions and behaviors. All strategies that we mentioned include some form of becoming aware of things, right? And particularly this last one, which is really hard one, right? Radical acceptance to cope with the things that you can't control. You need to grow a lot of awareness. I'm sure a lot of you have come across some version of what mindfulness is and how it's implemented in different fields and spaces in our lives. And here you have the mindfulness definition from the dictionary. It means focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. So this is a lot to be asked from anyone, and at the same time can be a practice that is very simple to implement in your life and can be tremendously helpful. All of the skills that we talk about really built up on your ability to develop some sense of awareness, right? If we don't know that something is off, that something is not helpful, that something is hurting, then we're never going to be able to try to address it and find a way to problem solve or cope with it. So really, mindfulness, kind of in more plain language, refers to being able to be present fully in the moment, without distraction, without judging yourself, and not getting caught up in thoughts or emotions. So this could be interpreted in many different things, and whatever kind of speaks to you that makes sense, then that works. Right now, a lot of you may be, while you're watching us live, you may have your phone and maybe texting or maybe eating and doing a few other things. Multitasking is essentially the opposite of mindfulness, right? If I were to ask you to be really fully present in the moment, I will ask you to put your phones down, leave the snack for later, maybe take a deep breath and set your intent and fully paying attention with all of your senses into what we're saying and what you're seeing on the screen. This whole mindfulness practice comes from formally like Buddhist meditation techniques. And there's been like really cool research done in like Buddhist monks where they show how actually the brain gets rewired. And there's not only change in the brain structures that help us control emotions and the intensity of emotions, but they actually also done studies taking blood samples from people and realized that the stress hormones that we have flowing around when we're in situations that are very difficult actually come down. So there's like hard science backing up this mindfulness approach. It's important to know that to be able to get those benefits, you don't need to have a formal mindfulness meditation practice. You can practice mindfulness on your everyday activities and the benefits are similar. So what's the difference between the two approaches and what may be the best fit for you? Mindfulness meditation is a formal practice, a regular practice. It has been unearthed for many, 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 many centuries. And it has this particular focus on the breath. So when we think about all the skills that we may have available, the breath is really something that is always with us, is accessible, and there's so many different ways in which we can connect to that breath to help us modulate our emotions and cope with this stress. So within the mindfulness practice, really the focus is to be present by kind of anchoring your awareness in your breath. And no matter where you are, you're breathing without any effort. So it's really a pretty easy and accessible tool to have in mind. Nowadays, there's a lot of apps that help you kind of get engaged in the practice in different ways. And there's a lot of YouTube videos. You don't need to download an application. Just as any other skill, really practice is what makes a difference. The brain, is kind of like a muscle in the body when we think about mindfulness, and you wouldn't expect going into the gym maybe twice a month and having a six-pack in a couple months, right? It's the same deal. You need to exercise and practice your mindfulness regularly to be able to get full benefit. Worried about it, the thought of just like sitting down and focusing on your breath and listening to an app is just not appealing at all. That is okay. We can bring this concept of mindfulness to daily activities. So thinking about how you can be fully present in what you're doing, right? As we discussed earlier, is kind of getting rid of distractions, phone, TV, food, and just setting your intention on your target. This is what I'm going to do right now, and I'm going to be fully present. It helps us to then very consciously engage our five senses. Not every activity of the day is going to allow you to do that. Like if you're eating, I don't know, your favorite cookie, then you can definitely engage your five senses, right? You're like looking at the cookie, thinking about the shape, thinking about the different ingredients it may have and how that looks. You can smell it, you can touch it with your hands, then you'll definitely taste it, right? That's an easy activity in which your five senses are engaged. And the purpose is really to remind yourself that you're focused on eating the cookie. You will get thoughts in your mind, you will get emotions, you'll feel how your body's aching maybe because you've spent too much time either laying on bed or sitting on a chair doing homework. And what's important is not to get stuck on those thoughts or emotions or sensations. So it's hard, it's really hard, but practice can definitely help. You want to go back to a place of realizing I had a worry thought. I'm eating my cookie and now I'm worried about the package it came in and I'm not sure if I cleaned it or sanitized. And you're like, oh, there's my worry thought. My target right now is to focus on the cookie. So I'm going to go back and engage with that, right? Doing this in a way that is not judgmental. So the purpose is not to have some clear mind with no thoughts, no emotions, and no sensations. There's not right or wrong way of doing it. The practice is just going back into setting your intention into the thing that you decided to focus on, okay? So it's really bringing back the attention. The more you do that, the easier it's gonna be when what you're trying to kind of cope with is an intense emotion. So you're super angry and it feels like you're gonna explode, or you're super anxious and it feels like you're gonna have a panic attack. And we can let that emotion be there. We can let the worry thoughts be there and decide, I'm going to focus on my breath and I'm going to put all my attention there. Or I'm just going to focus on the cup of coffee that I have in front of me and I'm going to engage my five senses. Those little shifts in attention can make a very big difference in your day-to-day, and over time, they will make a big difference in your brain, okay? So thinking about practicing everyday mindfulness can apply to anything you can think of. Eating, walking, showering, texting, talking to people mindfully, anything that you can think of, just set up a list of activities and practice one different activity every day with this intent of being mindful.
All right, thanks, Carolina. So I just want to go back for a moment. All of the skills that we've talked about, I just want to repeat what Carolina said. All of the skills that we've talked about today, they take a lot of practice. So it's like exercising muscles in order to build strength and endurance. We're exercising our emotion coping muscles. So you may try it one time and it doesn't take the emotions away. On the one hand, that's not totally the intent. We need our emotions. We need to feel them. We just need to titrate them, to relax them a little bit. If we're at a 10, these skills can help bring us down to a 5 or a 6, where we can think more clearly and make better choices. And if we practice, especially when we're calm, we'll have those muscles more ready for when we're really upset or freaked out. And I'll just say, using our 5 senses, Carolina mentioned this, that is another strategy we can use to relax. So if you feel like you're really freaking out and overwhelmed, just simply using your 5 senses to look at what you see in the room, to be still for a moment and listen for the sounds that you hear. What are the things that you smell? Maybe try this right now. Just kind of look around the room. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? what do you feel with your body, and what do you taste? Just shifting that focus in our brain to use our five senses to bring us into the present moment can bring that level of emotion down. But these things take practice. So we will, I want to highlight our upcoming webinars, because we'll review, our colleagues will review a lot of these skills in a lot more detail in the coming weeks. So you can learn a lot more about coping and keeping busy and managing routines, and have some examples for how to do this next week. The week after that, we'll talk about how do we stay connected to other people during this time of social distancing. At the end of the month, we'll have a whole webinar just on how do we deal with all of this anxiety or these unwanted thoughts. And then at the end of the month, we'll also talk a little bit more about acceptance, about accepting reality and making meaning during this really difficult time. And then we also have webinars each week for your parents. So we have a lot going on over the next month to try to help build on all the skills that we talked about today.
So here you guys are just seeing very few examples of some of the apps or resources that can be helpful for mindfulness. All of the ones that are listed there have free content. Headspace, which is the first one, has actually worldwide or nationwide content that is as specific for the current situation. So if you have it in your phone and maybe forgot about it, go revisit. If you haven't tried any of this, maybe try it out. It may be that one style could work better than the other, and if anything, just continue to look for what works for you. And then I think this is very important. We know that we are talking about mental health a lot in the context of this current crisis. Some people have better skills than others to cope with their emotions. I think in general, we're really not taught how to do this, right? And then we are in a situation that's unprecedented. And for some of us, maybe this could result in a crisis. And knowing that there is help available, regardless of where you are, it's helpful. The first resource here is for the crisis text line. You can access someone there 24/7, just sending a text. They also have good content reviewing some of the skills that we've gone over and providing a little bit more psychoeducation if you feel like, hey, you know what, I think this is just not me struggling with emotions, but maybe my anxiety is something that needs attention from a mental health professional, or my depression is really becoming an issue that I think I need more help. You can find some information there and ways to connect to providers. As we have spoke earlier, right now everyone is under a lot of stress and maybe stuck in situations at home that are not ideal. And there is increased tension in the homes across America and the world because of different reasons. And sometimes, unfortunately, the situations can escalate. And if that is the case, there's also help accessible confidentially for you and your family if that's something that you're experiencing. One of the biggest challenges when addressing difficulties with emotions and mental illness is preventing suicide. And given that right now, everyone's lives are more complicated and stressed out, we want to be vigilant, either for those thoughts coming up in our minds, or if we know that someone is maybe struggling more, and this could be a person who may end up harming themselves, then sharing information and accessing resources through the crisis lines and prevention lines. The first resource on your other column, this is New York City specific, but I do know that depending on your state and city, there are local resources to connect you through services and local crisis teams. And then the last resource, this is a website specific for LGBTQ. This is a particularly challenging situation for youth that may have not come out yet, and now they're stuck at home with their parents and trying to figure out how to manage the stress of the situation and the challenges in their process of self-identity and sexual orientation. So very helpful also to connect people to services and offer support live.
Okay, so We have just a few minutes left, but we did want to answer a few more of your questions that you wrote in. So we'll try to do this quickly in the next couple minutes. But one person asked, how do disappointing emotions affect self-esteem? And what this question really made me think about is how chronic stress and disappointment and chronic anxiety and disappointment can make us feel what I would call demoralized, sort of maybe hopeless or pessimistic about the future, and maybe even depressed. And chronic stress and anxiety can start to feel like things aren't going to get better. And when we start to feel depressed, then we can have unhelpful and negative thoughts about the world, about other people, and about ourselves. And that may in turn start to impact self-esteem. So I don't know that this is a direct connection, but we do really want to be tuned into the ways that our emotions are building on each other. And if we feel like we're chronically feeling stressed or anxious or unhappy, it's important that we try to shift to let some other sorts of feelings in, and just be aware about how this may be building and how we're coping with it.
So we also got a question about why are individuals easily irritated and unable to meet goals in this period. So I think just thinking about the many different circumstances that affect each person individually, even in just one home, everyone's going to have shared stressors, but also individual challenges and losses. And they're going to have all these different kind of emotions coming up, right? More than anything, I think a shared emotion that we all have is fear, anxiety of uncertainty about what's going to happen. When we are in situations where there's a threat or there's fear, our automatic biological response could go either to a freeze condition, a flight condition, or a fight condition. And we may not be fighting each other physically, but then that can come out as irritability. For some other people, actually, when sadness gets pretty bad, and there may be more of a depression kind of settling in, depression can also look like irritability. So there's many different factors, right? Even just the fact that we're stuck at home, and that as much as we love our family members, it is challenging to be in the same space, trying to figure out everyone's needs while everyone is worried and stressed out. So there's multiple reasons for people to be easily irritated. Now, the piece of being unable to meet goals. So on the one hand, we can think about this as we're trying to cope with all these emotions, it almost leaves like very little space to try to be effective and productive. That's one thing to think about. The other thing is some people may be feeling hopeless and feel like there's no point in doing anything because no matter what they do, this whole situation is out of their control, right? And another thing that I think it's important to think for young people in this transition is that a lot of those external kind of structures that hold us accountable have gone out the window, right? So right now, classes may be available online, and you can choose to see that at 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. And then if you choose 3 a.m., then maybe you choose to like go back to playing video games with your friends. And you can always ask the teacher for an extension because everyone's stressed out. So there's that flexibility, right? For people who are out of a job and know the job market right now is not great, they might feel like, what is the point in sending a resume if I'm not going to be getting hired anytime soon? And then for some, it might just be this anxiety is paralyzing, right? It's like you're so preoccupied with things that you really just can't get yourself to be productive and effective. So there's not one single reason, but there's different good reasons both to be irritated and have difficulties meeting goals right now.
So I'll pick up on what Dr. Zarate was saying. How do I handle feelings of anger? Well, that brings me back to this idea that was just mentioned about our fight or flight system, right? When we're confronted with a danger or a stressor, our body goes into this fight or flight response. And we think of flight or avoidance as the anxious or fearful response. And some people have the fight response that comes more easily to them, where we feel energized to act out or lash out. And there's a lot of very real reasons and valid reasons to feel angry and frustrated right now. So we've talked a little bit about this already, but we need to be aware of those feelings. If you can take a pause, take a breath, take a walk, give yourself a personal timeout. We usually just need to take a little bit of time to bring ourselves down a few notches in that feelings thermometer so that we can make a good choice, right? It doesn't mean we have to accept what's happening to us or accept the injustice from the other person, but we can de-escalate a situation by staying calm, by stepping away, and then come back when we feel ready to communicate ourselves more effectively, or we have a more clear head and can try to problem solve a situation. So some of these strategies, deep breathing, mindfulness, using your 5 senses to orient in the moment, these are different strategies that can help with those feelings of anger.
I would add to that if you feel that's something that's going to work for you, when you literally feel like the anger in your fist, and then like get down and do some push-ups, go out for a run, like let it out in a way that you find release. So a lot of this process, guys, of learning about our emotions and how to manage them is really learning how to listen to our bodies and what we respond best to, right? And that's going to be different for everyone. So our next question is really interesting. What about these strange dreams or nightmares that I'm having? Sleep is something that I think we don't entirely understand. There's many different theories. We know that it's super important. It's super important to rest our mind, but it's also important when we're growing, for learning and development and literally like growth. And young adults, brain still developing, and people can still grow until their mid-20s. So sleep has a lot of facets that impact our well-being, but also our development in very unique ways and in ways that we don't totally understand. Dreams are generated in our brain, right? And brain is the processing center for thoughts, for emotions, for fantasies, for fears, right? So in general, having dreams that are weird is actually pretty normal, right? And right now it makes a lot of sense to have nightmares, right? A lot of the information that we're processing is pretty scary, right? So we're processing information about a global pandemic that is a threat to everyone. We're processing information locally about losing people that we love and challenges in our communities. And we're processing all these emotions and all these thoughts, right? So if we combine that in our center of processing information, which is your brain, it makes sense that you are having dreams that may be weird or more scary than you regularly will.
So last question, what do I do if I'm unhappy with my living situation right now? So Carolina mentioned earlier, if home is unsafe, please use the resources that we've mentioned to keep yourself safe. If home is tense or unhappy, you can seek support from other people outside of your home, trying to let off steam, to share what's making you really frustrated or making you unhappy right now. Try to take breaks for yourself when or where you can. I know this is very hard if you have a lot of people in a small space, to find that space for yourself. So see what you can negotiate to get some moments for yourself. This is another opportunity where that idea of opposite action applies. So if we're feeling upset or frustrated or impatient with the people that we're with, it's a time where we can try even harder to practice patience. And again, it doesn't mean you have to accept if someone's mistreating you. You don't have to keep taking it. But if we can respond with patience, or take a moment to let everyone calm down and then come back and try to use some communication strategies to let people know what it is that's feeling frustrating, or try to work out the problems to make everyone at home have an environment that feels just more harmonious for everyone. So, letting the little things go, saying thank you, helping out, these are all things that, we can try to do to make home feel a little bit better for everyone. Again, this is not perfect, but it might prevent the escalations that can happen. And it's important that we remember that we can't control other people's behaviors. We can control our response. to other people's behavior. So that's hard. But again, thinking about how we use some of these strategies to make those choices is the point of tonight. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us. And we went a little over time, but we really, your questions were so on point, and we hope that this evening was helpful, and we hope that you'll tune in again. So please stay safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone. Take care and start practicing.